Hey, remember that time SpongeBob aired an episode about a deadly virus during a deadly pandemic? Let's talk about that. Okay, so I want you to cast your mind back to November 2020, when a little known pandemic was going around and doing some massive numbers. Everyone was indoors, a new US president just got elected, and SpongeBob aired an episode that would be banned in the US and multiple other countries. But why? Watch till the end. In the meantime, let's review this sick episode. It took me 10 minutes to come up with that and it's still shit. The first minute of the episode is pretty funny. It sets up a lot of things that I could have potentially enjoyed about the episode moving forward. You have SpongeBob, Patrick, Squidward, Mrs. Puff, Pearl, and Plankton, but we'll talk about him later. There was so much potential for different character interactions that we never really get to see. Just like, imagine a conversation between Squidward and Mrs. Puff, or Patrick and Plankton. That's something we never get to see, but I'm sure a lot of people would enjoy. They don't do anything with this. But in the meantime, the health inspector from Nasty Patty comes in and puts them all in quarantine.
Just as I feared, someone in this restaurant is infected with the highly contagious clam flu.
They all start panicking and running around the place despite not even knowing anything about this clam flu or how deadly it is. This is one of the problems with the episode. They bring this disease up and don't even explain its effects and such, so there's no real sense of danger for the characters or audience. So why should I or the characters be worried when I don't even know what this disease could do to them? In contrast to another episode with the same concept, Fungus Among Us. God, I fucking hate what the internet did to me. We at least get to see what the effects of the disease are. We don't get that here. But you know what we also don't get?
Quarantine schmarantine. I'm the great...
Yeah, they for real just burned Plankton out the whole episode just for a quick gag. Like, why? Plankton is one of the funniest characters here, and with the rest of the crew, like I said before, there was an opportunity for some new character interactions we've never seen before. Why not have Plankton try and steal the formula while he's quarantined with everyone? The writers had all of this in the palm of their hands and they just let it slip. The modern seasons have this habit of not using all their resources, and this is something I talked about in my last SpongeBob video, which you should definitely watch. Yes, I have no shame. Mr. Krab shares one of his old Navy stories about what he would do whenever someone on the ship would get sick, which sets up the next part of the episode with some grim implications. They'd basically lock people who were sick in the freezers, with no guarantee they would even get out. These dudes were lucky there's no jail at sea, because that's a good 15 murder charges right there. Make it 16 because SpongeBob is unfortunately the first victim of the freezer.
He belongs in the freezer. Get
Wait! I'll go willingly.
This is probably the dumbest moment in the whole episode. Like, I don't think I need to say why it's so dumb, but for the mentally challenged of you, how do they not see the pepper shaker fly in the air, enter this man's nose, which caused him to sneeze? I know it's supposed to be dumb and suspend my disbelief, but nah. These characters are not blind, my nigga. And you can't even use the but they're paranoid and not thinking straight. I already showed you how stupid that was in of itself, especially considering that later on in the episode they aren't showed to be paranoid anymore, so it's not even consistent. They could have at least made a progression type thing, where they start off calm and just a bit careful of each other, to them acting like how they did in the first scene, acting all goofy. That would have been a more realistic way of showing paranoia, and you know, that's how you tell a story. Not that we should even be worried for my guy SpongeBob, because within the freezer, there's this magical winter wonderland and he's just fine. Honestly, that's pretty creative. I'm a fan of that plot twist. You know, why the fuck am I even surprised? Of course he'd fake sick for an ice cream. This is something I talked about in my last SpongeBob video. Yes, I told y'all I have no shame. It's a small thing in the episode, but one that still ticks me off a bit every time I see it. Like, I've been saying throughout this whole video up to this point, but maybe instead of having Patrick lust for food, maybe he could have a conversation with Pearl or Mr. Krabs. Just something different. Man, when am I gonna say something good about the show for once? So Krabs, clearly being the most paranoid in the room, throws everyone in the freezer one by one because for whatever reason he's deathly afraid of getting sick. Honestly, it's pretty funny. I'm a sucker for a fast cut.
If no one's sick in here, then the sick person must be... Daddy!
I say we must out of here, grab crabs, and lock him away.
This has to be one of the most stupidest plans in this show's history. You would think that if everyone in one room is sick-free, and one person is sick but in another room, it would be safer not to leave the safe room and go into the room where the sick person is, and he's supposed to be the smart one in the room. I get that the story had to go somewhere from here, but they literally wrote themselves into this wall. Although I wonder what would have happened if they stayed in the freezer. Would they freeze and travel through time like an SB-19? I'm actually interested. Maybe Film Theory should do a video on that. So the characters have this goofy ass chase scene and some parts of it are kinda funny, but I feel like this scene drags on too long. Like at some point the slapstick gets boring and tired out. And hey, you know, maybe this could have been used for actually making the story engaging and make sense.
Funny story, I was holding my equipment upside down yesterday. Nobody was actually sick.
That is some bullshit. What plot twist is this? I legit didn't even have to do anything to debunk this, I just had to rewind the episode. For all of the money that these niggas sink into animating some of the slapstick, you would think they'd have the foresight to correctly animate something that is integral to the episode. It's not even a hard fix, just turn that shit upside down. I'm actually mad now in real life. So that's the episode. It's not that good. The start was okay, but it missed out on a lot of opportunities, it was paced very poorly, and did I mention the plot holes? But now let's talk about the controversy this episode brought on, cause there's a lot to unpack there too. Alright, cue the transition, my nigga. It's important to note that this episode, written by Steven Hillenburg, rest in peace, was written before the pandemic, thus the crew didn't have the foresight to know how poorly this episode would have aged. The first problem was that it appeared to turn what was at the time a serious situation into comedy. Despite the fact that they may have had the nuance to make an episode like this that didn't outright reference the pandemic, it was such a serious issue that they probably thought it was safer to shelve it as much as they could. This is probably the most logical decision they could have made, as airing the episode could have put the reputation of SpongeBob into question. People could have been fired, and I highly doubt anyone would think that's worth it just to air another episode of SpongeBob. I can already imagine the outrage from parents across the world that their kid was watching an episode about the virus. It was the smart business decision to make for sure, and one that saved the network a lot of trouble. But on the other hand, I feel like it sets a bad precedent, that nuance and context are irrelevant in media. Shelving this episode feels like that's the mindset we're heading to, and I don't agree with the notion that we can't speak or reference any sensitive matters in that way. Hell, the episode doesn't even feel like it's referencing anything. Without the bias of having just experienced the pandemic, this feels like a normal SpongeBob episode. And granted, while I don't like it, shelving it and not putting it on DVD feels like throwing away part of the show's history. At the end of the day, this is children's entertainment. It's not supposed to be political, and I think airing the episode would have been a ballsy move, and one that I would strangely respect Nickelodeon for. So what do I think was the right choice? What would I have done if I was in the situation where I had control? Well shit, I don't know man, fuck you asking me for?